So welcome to Unit 9, Developmental Psychology, and we are finally into Module 54, the final module in this unit. And if you're just joining, these modules correspond to Meyer Psychology for the AP course 3rd edition. They go right along with them. These are actually the lecture slides that go with the textbook. This one is kind of long, but I'll try to go through it fairly quickly. So there are quite a few learning targets for this module to be able to identify the physical changes that occur during middle and late adulthood, assess the impact of aging on memory, discuss how neurocognitive disorders and Alzheimer's disease affect cognitive ability, and discuss the themes and influences that mark our social journey from early adulthood until death, to be able to describe the changes in well-being across the lifespan and describe the range of reactions to the death of a loved one. So as we age, many physical attributes and abilities we possess when we're younger, they change significantly. And you can see this funny Grim Reaper cartoon on the right. So there are changes that happen throughout our lifespan. So what are the physical changes that occur in middle adulthood? Physical abilities, muscle strength, reaction time, your sensory keenness, and your cardiac output all begin an almost imperceptible decline. Just a slight decline starts in our mid-20s. However, during early and middle adulthood, physical vigor has less to do with age than with health and exercise habits. Adult abilities vary widely. Look at this guy. At age 92, the world's oldest barefoot water skier. Wow. He is shown at the right in 2002 when he first set the record at age 87. So what reproductive changes occur in middle adulthood? Aging brings a gradual decline in fertility, especially for women. For a 35 to 39-year-old woman, the chance of getting pregnant after one single act of intercourse is only half of that of a woman 19 to 26. Men experience a gradual decline in sperm count, testosterone. Women experience menopause as menstrual cycles end, and the ability to reproduce declines, usually within a few years of age 50. Longevity, French woman Jean Clement, don't have a very good French accent there, sorry. The oldest human in history with authenticated age died in 1998 at age 122. At age 100, she was still riding a bike. At age 114, she became the oldest film actor ever by portraying herself in Vincent and Me. What does research tell us about longevity? From 1950 to 2015, life expectancy at birth increased worldwide greatly. Look at that, from 46.5 years to 71 years, and to 80 and beyond in 29 countries, according to the World Health Organization. In China, the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia, life expectancy has risen to 76, 79, 81, 82, and 82 respectively. Today, 1 in 10 people worldwide are actually 60 or older. The United Nations projects that the number will triple, nearly 3 in 10 by 2100, and nearly 4 in 10 in Europe. So tips of chromosomes called telomeres wear down, much as the tip of a shoelace kind of phrase. This wear is accelerated by environmental factors, smoking, obesity, stress. Breastfed children have longer telomeres, while those who suffer frequent abuse or bullying experience the biological scars of shorter telomeres, according to this research. As they shorten, aging cells may die without being replaced with perfect genetic replicas. Researchers have observed an intriguing death-deferral phenomenon. Across one 15-year period, 2,000 to 3,000 more Americans died on the 2 days after Christmas than on Christmas and the 2 days before. The death rate also increases when people reach their birthdays and when they survive until after other milestones, like the first day of the new millennium. So males are more prone to dying. Although 126 male embryos begin life for every 100 females, the sex ratio is down to 105 males for every 100 females at birth. During the first year, male infants' death rates exceed females by 1/4. Worldwide, women outlive men by about 4.7 years. By age 100, women outnumber men by 5 to 1. How do sensory abilities change in late adulthood? Although physical decline begins in early adulthood, we are not usually acutely aware of it until later in life. When the stairs get steeper, the print gets smaller, and other people seem to mumble more. I may be experiencing some of those. Visual sharpness diminishes, as does distance perception and adaptation to light level changes. Muscle strength, reaction time, and stamina also diminish, as do smell, hearing, and touch. So just for some information, most stairway falls taken by older occur on the top step, precisely where the person typically descends from a window-lit hallway into a darker stairwell. Our knowledge of aging could be used to design environments that would be able to reduce such incidents. Slowing reactions do contribute to increased accident risks among those 75 years and older, and their greater fragility increases their risk of death when those accidents do happen. And this is a visual of that in terms of the fatal accident rate. You can see that it's higher when you're young and higher again when you're much older. Compared with teens, older people do take a bit more time to react, to solve perceptual puzzles, and even to remember names. What does the research show about the effects of aging on the brain? Brain regions important to memory begin to atrophy during aging. The blood-brain barrier also breaks down, beginning in the hippocampus. Think back to our biological basis of behavior modules, which furthers cognitive decline. In early adulthood, a small, gradual net loss of brain cells begins, contributing by age 80 to a brain rate reduction of 5% or so. So what things do we remember well as we age? Looking back in later life, adults asked to recall the 1 or 2 most important events over the last half century tend to name events from their teens or 20s. They also display this reminiscence bump when asked to name their all-time favorite music, movies, and athletes. Whatever people experience around this time, the Vietnam War, 9/11, the election of the first Black US president, becomes sort of pivotal in their mind and in their memories. So what research has been conducted on recall in later years? In one test of recall, people watching video clips as 14 strangers said their names using like a format like, "Hi, I'm Larry," then those strangers reappeared and gave additional details. For example, they said, "I'm from Philadelphia," providing more visual and voice cues for remembering that person's name. After a second and third replay of the introductions, everyone remembered more names, but younger adults consistently surpassed older adults. And you can see a visual of the results of this research. In another experiment, when asked to recognize 24 words they had earlier tried to memorize, older adults showed minimal memory decline. When asked to recall that information without clues, however, and that's really interesting to think about, without any clues, the decline was greater. So what research methods are used? We've talked about these before. If you've listened to any other modules, cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. So cross-sectional research compares people of different ages at the same point in time, whereas longitudinal research follows and retests the same people over time. What do studies show regarding intelligence and cognition as the end of life nears? Age is less a predictor of memory and intelligence than its proximity to death. Knowing whether someone is 8 months or 8 years from a natural death, regardless of age, gives a clue to that person's mental ability. In the last 3 or 4 years of life, and especially as death approaches, negative feeling and cognitive decline typically increase. Researchers call this near-death drop terminal decline. So what are some neurocognitive disorders? What are they in general? They're acquired, not lifelong, disorders marked by cognitive deficits, often related to Alzheimer's disease, brain injury or disease, or substance abuse. In older adults, neurocognitive disorders were formerly called dementia. A series of small strokes, a brain tumor, or alcohol use disorder can progressively damage the brain. Heavy midlife smoking more than doubles later risk of the disorder. Excuse me. Alzheimer's disease is a neurocognitive disorder marked by neural plaques, often with onset after age 80 and entailing a progressive decline in memory and other cognitive abilities. As the disease runs its course, after 5 to 20 years, the person may have an emotionally flat affect, and then they may become disoriented, disinhibited, have problems with incontinence, and finally, sort of mentally vacant. It can be a really, really, really sad thing to see happen for sure. During a memory test, MRI scans of the brains of people at risk for Alzheimer's at the top revealed more intense activity when compared with normal brains at the bottom, shown at the bottom. It's a little bit hard to see in this image. So what themes and influences mark the social journey from early adulthood to death? There are many differences between younger and older adults are created by their significant differences in life events. A new job means new relationships, new expectations, and new demands. Marriage usually brings the joy of intimacy, and then there's also some stress with the merging of two lives. The 3 years surrounding the birth of a child bring increased life satisfaction for most parents, and the death of a loved one creates obviously an irreplaceable loss for people. So these are different themes that mark the social journey from early adulthood to death. As people enter their 40s, they undergo a transition to middle adulthood, a time when they realize their life might mostly behind them instead of ahead of them. Some psychologists have argued that for many, this midlife transition is a crisis, a time of great struggle, regret. And this popular image of the midlife crisis is, often an early 40s man who, makes some questionable decisions in life. But this is more of a myth than a reality, more of a movie myth than a reality. Unhappiness, job dissatisfaction, marital dissatisfaction, divorce, anxiety, and suicide do not surge during the early 40s. Divorce, for example, is most common among those in their 20s. Suicide is most common among those in their 70s and 80s. One study of emotional instability in nearly 10,000 men and women found not the slightest evidence that distress peaks anywhere in the midlife age range. What is the social clock? So life events trigger transitions to new life stages at varying ages. The social clock, the definition of the right time to kind of do things. When should I leave home? When should I get a job? When should I get married? When should I have children? When should I retire? Varies from era to era, different time periods, and from culture to culture. There was sort of a once rigid sequence of when all these things should be done, but this is loosened, especially in Western cultures. The social clock still ticks, but people feel freer about maybe not being completely in sync with that social clock. So two basic aspects of our lives dominate adulthood. Erik Erikson, if you listened to the 2 modules ago, I think it was, called them the social crisis of intimacy versus isolation and generativity, which is sort of being productive and supporting future generations versus stagnation. So it's the ability to form close relationships and be productive. Those are the crises that seem to dominate adulthood. Sigmund Freud put this more simply: the healthy adult, he said, is one who can love and work. Love, if you can define it, is defined right here by our textbook authors. Intimacy, attachment, commitment. Love by whatever name is central to healthy and happy adulthood. How do couples meet? A national survey of 2,452 straight couples and 462 gay and lesbian couples reveals the increasing role of the internet in how couples meet. You can see huge changes in that across the past couple decades. Does living together before marriage decrease the odds of divorce? Research says no. In Europe, Canada, and the US, those who live together before marriage, and especially before engagement, actually have higher rates of divorce and marital dysfunction than those who do not. Remember, this is just a correlation, and it isn't saying that living together before marriage is causing divorce, that there's just a correlation or relationship there. There are probably other variables involved. Is the empty nest syndrome a myth? Although love bears children, children eventually leave home. And this departure can be a significant and sometimes difficult event. But for most people, an empty nest is actually a happy place. Many parents experience sort of a little bit of a post-launch honeymoon, especially if they maintain close relationships with their children who have left the nest, so to speak. So consider this quote: "Our love for children is so unlike any other human emotion. I fell in love with my babies so quickly and profoundly, almost completely independently of their particular qualities. And yet 20 years later, I was more or less happy to see them go. I had to be happy to see them go. We are totally devoted to them when they are little, and yet the most we can expect in return when they grow up is that they regard us with bemused and tolerant affection." This was written by famous developmental psychologist Alison Gopnik. So work can provide a sense of identity and competence, that Erikson stage, trying to develop that generativity and opportunities for accomplishment. Perhaps this is why challenging and interesting occupations seem to enhance people's happiness. Both younger and older adults report greater happiness when spending some time with some other people as well. You can see in this visual that humans are generally social creatures, some more social than others. So what are the biological influences on successful aging in terms of this is biopsychosocial. Sorry, this is the model that has been woven throughout all of the modules that we've talked about in this playlist, that there are biological, psychological, and sociocultural influences on successful aging. The biological influences are in the blue, and then the psychological ones are things like optimistic outlook, physical and mental activity, and lifestyle. And then there are also some social cultural influences, support from friends and family and doing meaningful activities and so on. In terms of biological, I don't think I read any of those, like having appropriate nutrition, different things in our biology that have an influence on our successful aging. How do emotions stabilize as we age? As the years go by, feelings kind of mellow. Highs become less high, lows become less low. You may know someone who's much older, and you may have heard, "Oh, you should have known them when they were younger. They were highly emotional." And that sort of mellows out as they get older. Compliments provoke less elation and criticism less despair, as both become merely additional feedback. As we age, life becomes less of an emotional roller coaster. Sorry, I had a little dog interruption. So what does research show about how we grieve? Terminally ill and bereaved people do not go through identical predictable stages. It's not identical. Those who express the strongest grief immediately do not purge their grief more quickly. Grieving spouses who talk often with others, or receive grief counseling adjust about as well as those who grieve more privately. This is according to all this research that is identified right here. Facing death with dignity and openness helps people complete the life cycle with a sense of life's meaningfulness and unity. The sense that their existence has been good, and that life and death are parts of an ongoing cycle helps. Although, of course, death is unwelcome, life itself can be affirmed even at death. This is especially so for people who review their lives not with despair. Think back to Erikson's stages from 2 modules ago. But with what Erik Erikson called a sense of integrity, a feeling that one's life has been meaningful and worthwhile. So our learning target reviews, we're back to those. So muscular strength, reaction time, sensory abilities, and cardiac output begin to decline in the mid-20s and continue to decline throughout middle and late adulthood. Women's period of fertility ends with menopause around age 50. Men experience a more gradual decline in fertility and sexual response. In late adulthood, the immune system weakens, increasing susceptibility to life-threatening illnesses. Chromosome tips called telomeres wear down, reducing the chances of normal genetic replication. But for some, longevity-supported genes, low stress, and good health habits enable better health in later life. So as the years pass, recall begins to decline in terms of memory, especially for meaningless information, but recognition memory remains pretty strong. Developmental researchers study age-related changes with both cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. Terminal decline describes the cognitive decline in those final few years of life. Neurocognitive disorders, NCDs, they were formerly called dementia, in older adults are marked by cognitive deficits. Alzheimer's is the one we probably know of most well. It causes the deterioration of memory, then reasoning. After 5 to 10 years, a person with Alzheimer usually becomes emotionally flat, disoriented, disinhibited, incontinent, and finally mentally vacant. Adults do not progress through an orderly sequence of age-related social changes. Chance events can determine life choices. Evidence does not indicate that adults experience a midlife crisis. That's kind of a psychomyth. Or that distress peaks in midlife. The social clock is a culture's preferred timing for social events, such as when people generally get married, parenthood, and retirement. Adulthood's dominant themes are love and work, which Erik Erikson called intimacy and generativity. In terms of our well-being, our self-confidence and sense of identity tends to strengthen across the lifespan. Surveys show that life satisfaction is unrelated to age. Positive emotions increase after midlife and negative ones decrease. As we age, we experience fewer extremes of emotion and mood. And finally, people do not seem to grieve in predictable stages as we once thought. Strong expressions of emotion may not actually purge grief, and bereavement therapy is not significantly more effective than grieving without such aid. Erik Erikson viewed the late adulthood psychosocial task as developing a sense of integrity versus a sense of despair. Thank you for listening. Take care.